Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Alessandro Benzer. I'm with Exciting. Welcome you here to the webinar. I have with me as a panelist Tobias Keller from SAP, who will be leading today's webinar. We'll talk about UI masking and UI logging, a very exciting new solution or platform from SAP. Before I let Tobias get started, a couple of housekeeping rules. The webinar will be recorded. So after the webinar, we will send out the recording. You should get an automated email by tomorrow with all the handouts and everything that we will deliver as part of the webinar. And during the webinar, if you guys have any questions, there's a questions box that you can use. Feel free to type in the questions. If we have time at the end of the webinar, we try to stay within the hour. We'll try to answer a couple. Whatever is unanswered at the end, we will answer by email. So if you have a question, feel free to ask it. We will either answer it today or then in a follow-up email that will be sent out automatically by the system. With that being said, pleased to welcome Tobias. Tobias, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Alessandro, and thank you also for the warm intro. I'm glad to be here with Exciting as one of our main implementation partners for UI masking and UI logging. A few words on me. You are going to hear my voice for the next roughly hour or so. I'm Tobias Keller. I'm the product manager for the topic we call or group together in the wording of UI data security. This is mainly UI masking and UI logging. I am part of SAP Innovative Business Solutions, formerly also known as custom development. We do not only provide custom specific projects, but we also have a nice range of very specific, sometimes products, and UI masking, UI logging are just like that. So these are typical SAP products with all the benefits and caveats that they bring. We are positioning these two topics, masking and logging, clearly in the area of data protection. Just to bring everybody to speed a little bit or to the same topic where we are, data protection or data security, we get two distinct driving factors as feedback from our customers when we talk to them. Security threats arise, of course, or the threat of losing data comes, there's two different ways why our customers want to protect these types of data. One is legal requirements, which are mainly concerned about personal information. So the personal rights of people due to or concerning their own right to their information being infringed upon. This being a political motivation, then is turned into legal requirements that you as organizations, we as SAP, everybody has to adhere to. But we also have a lot of customers who come to us because they are afraid or are seeing a risk that they may lose valuable business information, which can be very specific information, trade secrets or production secrets, or also HR information pertaining to their best users, their best employees. These data leaking out and getting to the wrong hands, of course, can be a very big financial risk to an organization. That said, I have to claim we are not talking about the typical threat that most people have in mind when they think about security threats first, which is the hacker. So people from the outside trying to attack and steal the most important secrets out of an organization. No, we are coming from a different angle, and this angle basically concerns people who are already sitting inside the enterprise. It is your employees who, by malevolence or just negligence, may be in an excellent spot of accessing information which is sensitive and may be unaware of what they're doing with it, or may even be willingly taking this information and giving it on to the wrong people. We consider this a quite big threat. I've just put together a couple of media snippets quite a while back, so this is not only relevant as of now, this has been with us for 10 years, and this is also roughly how old our solutions are. Probably certainly the problem is a lot older than that even. But this threat from insiders is tricky because of two reasons. First of all, those insiders are there. They must do the things they do. They are your employees. They must fulfill the tasks. But the real problem is it is very tough and difficult to decide who should be doing what exactly, and then technically also bring this into SAP systems in the authorization regime. Now, the authorization regime based on roles is fine. That's very good. It's probably something everybody is running, and certainly something everybody should be running. But we have found a lot of customers who claim that the possibilities offered are not exactly sufficient. There are use cases where they say they need a more granular way of determining who is going to be able to access which data exactly. And if the data is being accessed, then they want to have a very clear proof that this has happened. That's why we have brought up masking and logging as a two-step approach to counter specifically the insider threat. Now, the first step clearly is UR masking. UR masking is a solution by which configurably you can conceal specific data. This means values in fields or in columns. We are providing more information by now, but for the time being, let's leave it with that. You're defining which information is quite sensitive in your environments for which users, in which UIs, for instance, and define that they should be protected. Now, our regime basically is as soon as a value is configured for protection, nobody in the system by default would be able anymore to see it unless this employee is specifically authorized to see the data. So we're really putting a block against anybody seeing this value in clear unless there's an additional authentication or authorization available and configured for these users. Now this, of course, takes out a lot of sensitive information from screens, which decreases basically the possibilities of attack, the amount of data that can be stolen. Which is a very nice and very strong approach, as long as you can clearly determine who shall be seeing what. And of course, if you can't determine that very clearly, or you have a need to show specific data to users, they must be able to access these data. This is exactly where the second part of UI data protection comes in, UI logging. Now with UI logging, basically you change nothing in the UIs. The data are accessible to the users who can normally access them based on their roles, but their access is explicitly logged, and this enables you to analyze the access. We heard back from our customers that the approach, whatever technically it is, but just having the idea in employees that their actions can be monitored and protocoled, changes their behavior. It induces a more compliant and more aware way of accessing data. And that also means people are not going to access data anymore just because out of pure curiosity about something. We had the example in a hospital where somebody who was an employee was in a hospital, and afterwards the whole hospital knew that this employee had been hospitalized, and everybody knew about the ailment, and this is of course not good for the enterprise and for the reliability to employees of the enterprise, but also not to customers either. So these types of data accesses usually abate, are strongly reduced just by using functionality like UI logging, or potentially even just by claiming that something like that exists. However, UI logging is of course technically also allowing you to identify irregular data access to prove it, and by the amount of data that you can collect, also run analysis that allow you to understand what is going on, and in the case of an emergency and you are thinking that you may be having a leak, find out exactly what is happening and also take the right decisions how to behave. Now we usually say that UI masking acts like a speed limiter. It breaks, or it basically when you enter an area where the speed limit is active, you can't do anything, your car is going to break down. This is what UI masking is doing. The user can move through the system only at the speed that you allow him to. That said, UI logging basically is more like a speed camera. Masking was a speed limiter that limits you down. Logging is the speed camera. You can drive by the camera as fast as you like. However, if you're too fast, there is probably going to be a nice snapshot, a nice photo of you, and somebody may not come knocking on your door and asking what you have been doing. The following slide is mainly something I'm going to provide to you in the handout. It is a summary of both of these slides in in one slide. Now, what are we doing in masking and logging in the way of changes in the system? What we're looking at in the screen is a typical SAP system without masking and logging active. You have user interfaces that can be SAP GUI, however, can also be Fury, WebDIM Pro ABAP, CRM Web Client UI, all the areas in which we offer the masking and logging functionality. The user is requesting information data from the system. The request is picked up. It runs through the application layer. Data are retrieved from the database layer, processed back, prepared for display, and then the response is sent over to the UI where the user is sitting. Now, with masking in place, basically nothing changes in the upstream, so from the request to the database, but on the way back, just before the data are being sent back to the user for display, masking is checking out what are the data which are to be displayed, what are the types, what are the fields, are any of these relevant for protection in masking, are they configured? If yes, there's a bit more logic, not only configurable, but also there's, of course, bodies available that can help determine mainly everything, how a field should be looking or who and specifically shall be authorized. Also, dynamic access scenarios are possible via bodies already today, where you can say, I determine based on the attributes of a given employee whether his data shall be shown. So you could build a scenario where you say, I'm a manager who is looking at an employee's data. He is my direct report. So I may see some information pertaining to this person, like the date of birth or the social security number. However, to an employee who is reporting to my direct report, I would not be allowed to see these data. These are dynamic scenarios which can be brought about with the bodies we are providing. I will have a few more words on that functionality in the roadmap in the Outlook. After masking has determined whether a user is authorized or not, it would then either hand the data on unchanged if the user is authorized, but write a trace, a small protocol, that the data were accessed in clear. If the user is not specifically authorized, we would replace the real data with masked values, access or anything else, and you can determine that in most cases as well, and feed these signs, the masked information, back into the stream, which moves on to the user in the UI. So the user is still accessing the data through his original SAP UI, SAP GUI, UI5 Fury app. However, the values that are appearing in specific fields would be changed in order to protect the information. Now with UI logging, we have in the same picture a two-step approach. Again here, basically UI logging is already getting active directly after a request enters the system. So selection parameters, the actions a user has triggered, all these things, the actions from the users are first protocoled. And after masking has been active, we take the second leg of our round trip. We also protocol the data which are going out, which are being sent back to the user. That together, the input and the output, we call a round trip. And all these data of this round trip are synchronously written into a temporary log from which we can trigger alerts. It's also configurable ways where you can say for specific events, you want to have an email alert or a system alert immediately. And we can also feed this information into a separate SAP offering, SAP Enterprise Threat Detection, which is a SIEM type of solution from SAP, collecting different types of logs and running logic and patterns over these logs in order to determine also in real time whether anything is happening that could be a threat and raising these as alerts to the security office. For UI logging, the temporary log is existing in your productive system, that synchronously written there in order to make sure no data are dropped, no data are lost. You would, in the implementation, set up a job that shifts these data to a permanent or more permanent repository log storage that is capable of catching the amount of data that you intend or you expect that will be generated, and it's big enough and it's also powerful enough to allow for a useful analysis, because our log analyzer is linked to this repository. So it's a way to look at these data. It is more than a mere log display. It's of course allowing you to look into it and filter for specific requirements, but we are also offering functionality in order to group this information, in order to answer questions that you have to the log better. Basically looking for a specific field who has accessed it, we would find also not only the specific access when it was accessed, but also the surrounding round trips. Because a user, well, he has accessed a specific field, but he has done that in a specific session. And we group our logs by basically the session ID. So you immediately have a complete overview you can click through and with this understand the movements of the user in the system. And by that, also understand more about the intention of the user, what he has been doing. It can make a big difference if a user is double clicking his way in a system through different screens. And suddenly he's double clicking and jumping into a screen which holds the relevant sensitive information, but immediately notices that he clicked wrong and hits F3 back, and half a second later or so he is out of the screen again. So you can assume that it was just a mistake and not willing access of these data. But it would be a completely different case if somebody is jumping into transactions back and forth for multiple cases, or is jumping in an SE16N whatever table display and hits a download or a printout functionality in the screen. And those are things you can determine with UI logging, not only that the specific data value was accessed, but also how and the surroundings of it. So that said, a few words on the coverage of what we're offering. Basically, we are having two lines, two releases. One release is specific for S/4HANA scenarios. This has been brought out late last year and is currently being enhanced. So we are targeting feature packs in the next few weeks. I would say a few more words on that. Basically, these S/4HANA native functionalities, for instance, for UI masking is one license, it's one material from SAP, which is grouping what has been available or still is available for classic scenarios in ECC ERP. Here we had, because the product grew over time, we released 4 different materials for different licenses. And basically as a customer, you have the possibility to choose those licenses that you need for your scenarios. How the scenarios are covered or what you require depends on the UI technology by which data are being displayed to users. So most of our customers go for the SAP GUI license. That's of course the power horse of any SAP system. But also UI5 and Fury apps, which we can protect, are gaining a lot of speed. In addition, we offer masking in Web Client UI, SAP CRM scenarios, plus WebDIM Pro ABAP scenarios. These are basically most often portal scenarios, floor plan manager, transactions, screens that many customers have built by themselves because it was quite easy and quite efficient to build additional functionality with WebDIM Pro ABAP based screens. So that's what we can cover with UI masking and what is grouped all together as a technical coverage in the S4 native functionality. Similar with UI logging, same story here. We are grouping everything that was available before into one product, with the difference that we also offer coverage for specific scenarios of business warehouse access via the interfaces mentioned here and RFC BAPI and web services. Now, these are two functionalities we technically do not offer and do not cover for UI masking at this time. Basically, we have had the requests a couple of times, but we have not received adequate information or enough requirements in order to help us understand what would be required. So if you have requirements in this area, please let us know. I am very interested to collect these in order to maybe also bring about a masking feature for the other channels. To give you an overview of how this is looking, basically where we come from, for ECC scenarios and also S/4HANA scenarios, until last year, we had the existing 10 classic solutions. You pick and choose just those functionalities you want. Each of these is a material number and can be licensed. And in order to bring them to S/4HANA and cover for new features that are mainly relevant in latest releases for SAP NetWeaver. We have grouped them together, and we are based on newer releases of SAP NetWeaver. Here, there's additional functionality coming in that is not downported anymore to many of the systems and NetWeaver releases that were relevant or are still relevant for our classic features. If you're possessing licenses of the classic type and want to convert or want to transform your system landscape and use S/4HANA, there is conversion options in place by which you can port the functionality, the licenses, the usage rights you have into the S/4HANA world as well. Now, this is a commercial topic. And just to give you an overview, also where we position or of the environment where we are, these solutions are part of the GRC sales bag, which is part of the financial sales bag. Several of these functionalities you may be knowing. It's the big GRC solutions or big security and authorization solutions of SAP Identity Management, access control, the single sign-on offering, and also some additional features like the CVA code vulnerability analysis. It's in this area where we also put UI logging, masking, as well as SAP Enterprise Threat Detection. Good. As a small wrap-up, what we're offering here are products. Well, it didn't come out completely. I think this slide should be in the end, but we will also show what we are covering here. This insider, that's something that we are not aware anybody else actually can do in this manner, in this technical manner, as we can do as an SAP solution, and also at the cost that comes to you. You are basically increasing your compliance if you use this product in the right way. We will have a couple of more information on that later, and potentially also decrease your risk exposure, so your financial risk exposure. Your masking is unique functionality in SAP screens and applications. So from SAP, there is no other solution which is doing something like that. And quite frankly, I have not seen a solution that is offering just this amount and level of masking or data protection options like we do. UI logging, we position this as a premium offering from SAP in the area of data access logging. Premium because there is standard functionality available here, a feature called read access logging, which is part of the SAP NetWeaver license. That is covering certainly also specific scenarios. However, we have heard back from customers that this coverage is interesting only in quite limited scenarios. As soon as you have bigger scenarios or really want to do something with the information that you're logging, you would be tempted to consider UI logging because of the depth of the logging we can achieve, and also the breadth, the amount of information that we enable to capture with limited or very limited effort in the implementation. That said, we are SAP products. Of course, we are aligned with SAP standards. These are products which are, in the case of S/4HANA, standard products, and for the classic scenarios, standard close or close to standard products. We adhere to the quality markers of SAP products, which make us secure, extremely performant as well, also with the close alignment with SAP basis, who provide some functionality that is triggering us, and that also makes you future-proof. In case any future releases come up, we are going to cover these for you within the restrictions that we put to the products concerning maintenance timelines. The quick implementation is something we are going to talk on in a minute as well. And maintenance options exist for these products. The part to mention here is you may be knowing SAP support. You create tickets, and your ticket is being picked up and processed. Sometimes it can take a while until the right person is assigned to the product and is found and assigned to the product. For us, this is not the issue. You get a very specific component for our solutions, and the only persons who are monitoring this are actually the product team. So those people who have developed the solution and who know the solution, and those people who will be required to solve your problems. With that, I would like to take you into a short overview of our solutions. I usually prefer to do this as live demos. However, right now, considering the time restrictions, I have just assembled a couple of screenshots. I will give you information later on in this in the presentation where you can get a recorded demo in a live scenario, which I could also show you right now. So this is information which is available, but I would take it offline, or everybody should take it offline. Now, when we talk about UR masking, the speed limiter, usually a picture says more than 1,000 words. Basically, you're looking at standard SAP screens, GUI screens, Fury screens, table display in SAP GUI, and the output from a table display. And we have simply marked and configured a couple of fields to mask. So we can achieve masking in basically almost every field. You see, we are aware of one restriction in a slightly exotic way. This is an ALV tree structure, it is called technically. It is used in partner address information. So in the partner transaction, the address information of your business partners. That is something we cannot offer out of the box in a configurable fashion. However, with a very limited effort, we can also enable you to configure that, but it would be a slight modification we can provide for your systems. Now, there's two more things to note here. Not only can we mask each of the fields, we also set these fields to display only. So even a field that is like here an amount field would usually be accessible, then it is editable in an edit transaction, but with masking active, it will be set to display only. And you see here that in one case we have masked out the amount field, in another case it is not masked out. So this is additional logic, which we allow you to put into the system via bodies, which are small user exits, more or less, where you can implement additional logic and which we guarantee will remain stable in the future. It goes further than that, however. This is also possible to do in table displays. For instance, here we had a logic where, say, in VBUC, it's a sales document header, and the sales document number is there, and the net value is shown or masked out depending on the status of this document. If the document is in the status that it has been paid and beyond, then this value becomes very uninteresting for the person who's looking into it, because he is responsible for going after customers and asking them to pay. So he should see only those cases where the value or the bill has not been paid, but those that have been paid are irrelevant for him. He should not even be knowing that. So these are all scenarios you can achieve. And in the download from SA16 tables, of course, we have been very active and we have identified a lot of different options technically, how an output can be triggered and a printout can be triggered. And we have done what we could, and I hope we have found everything, but enable technically all these options for protection with masking. So in the output from a database table, you would either see the exact values as shown in the table. In a few cases, we cannot provide it without modifications. In those cases, we take the liberty of remove complete columns from the output. And in one or two very specific cases with the spool server very deep in Subnet Weaver, we do not want to modify here. Nobody else wants to do that either. In those cases, we took the liberty of disabling the printout trigger, the action button or menu entry that would trigger this. Now, this is in order to achieve a coherent and comprehensive data protection with masking, fully knowing that your users are maybe not going to like it because it makes their work more cumbersome. But in order to have a waterproof setup, who should be accessing which data and not, that is something that is to be considered and is required actually to do. Now, when we think about this classic UI masking solutions as a configuration overview, basically these were four mostly disjunct solutions. Technically, they are very different. So the way how data can be or field values or fields can be configured for protection is very different. The overarching thing that we had together was that in the configuration main screen, you would enter a specific role. It's one field for one role that you can put, and every user who's assigned to this role, specifically in the roles and authorizations, would have access to these data. Everybody who is not assigned, of course, then would not see this data in clear. But it was really 4 different solutions, 4 different add-ons, 4 different materials, also licenses that were also disjunct. Now with the latest release for UI data protection masking for SAP S/4HANA, as it is called, we have strongly enhanced the functionality besides bringing together those 4 solutions. We have completely overhauled the complete configuration logic. Basically, we are grouping those 4 different UI technologies into one overarching, you could call it kind of a data object. We refer to it as a logical attribute, where basically say, I have a logical attribute, which is social security number. And now you would be able to map any field in the supported UI technologies where you say this is a social security number. Now, there's also ways to speed this up by automatically determining based on data elements which are available in SAP, which data elements are pertaining to a social security number, but also based on table, database table and field. We have a crawler, basically. It's a standard functionality we're used that determines where in the UI all these security numbers are used, and those would be determined automatically and mapped into this logical attribute. We have enhanced the functionality by which data can be protected. Not only can we mask out data values, but we can also empty fields. We can disable the field while showing the actual value. We can also hide the field. So the complete field with its descriptor, with its text, is then gone. It's just a blank space in the UI where it formerly existed. We still provide the functionality to configure to who the data shall be shown based on the roles and attributes. And as a piece of roadmap information, we will also provide, or we intend to provide, functionality by which a policy, basically business logic, can be implemented, can be configured, that would then by our solution be transferred into the required ABAP coding to provide this logic in a technically relevant and efficient way. This is the dynamic authorization determination through additional logic. Now that is available or going to be available for S/4HANA solutions only. All the classic solutions are basically out of the picture for that. Retroactively, we do not see a way to introduce this because of the huge changes we've done to the complete configuration logic. However, here we do provide the bodies, and we have found that customers who use the classic solutions are quite okay with it. The bodies need to be programmed in ABAP, so this is something where you need an ABAP programmer, but the efforts are quite low. And we found that mainly the test efforts are to be considered because they can be usually higher than the actual coding efforts. But for a simple body, for a field, we have seen that it takes maybe 2 hours, 4 hours, in more complex cases a day for a good developer to bring this about. And then, of course, testing has to happen. In the new solution, we also bring functionality. It's reveal on demand functionality, basically where we say, even though I, as a user, I'm authorized to see a specific field. However, when I first access a screen where this field is shown, the field would appear masked to me. I can then trigger a functionality which takes a trace. I can put in a reason code or a free text, which is configurable as a requirement, and only then will I be shown this field. Now, this is, of course, again, the idea behind logging, basically. Users who know that their actions can be monitored would take a step back in case of data access where they do not think they can prove that they have a claim to see this information. I think that's basically it. From a configuration logic, so similar as what we had in the classic solution, I tried to map this. Basically, we have the logic attribute as a central configuration object. You would be mapping all the data elements, table fields, which then determine DINPRO fields, but also other UI technology fields which are relevant as sensitive entities in this case. You can configure the trace, when the trace shall be written, always, never, in case of unmasked display, and or in case of reveal on demand scenarios. In this case, we will also trace the business reason which was given by the user or the free text that he wrote. You can activate the reveal on demand functionality on the logical attribute level. So over all your UIs, which are connected, and all the fields which are connected, you would have a consistent behavior concerning reveal on demand as well. And the authorization paradigm settings. Now we are offering two options. One is the role-based authorizations, where basically you can enter one role that determines whether a given user has access unmasked because he has this role. Now linked to the role, we have the actions which are triggered or which are linked to the authorizations. If you're authorized, you would usually see the field in clear, but you can also say that in those cases, you would actually at least show a couple of characters, but everybody else should not be seeing anything or just stars for the complete length of the field. And this comes in with the masking patterns. Now is a roadmap item, which I consider very interesting because we have heard from many customers that they're very interested in this type of functionality. We are going to provide policies. So this is attribute-based authorizations. It's just the examples I gave before that can be implemented through bodies. However, we intend to bring the functionality to make this configurable by a business user. I've just been testing the solution before we put it into production. So ask me again in a couple of weeks, then I can commit that we are going to bring this functionality or that we already have it. Right now, I can only say that we intend to bring this. But what we are bringing in is really a feature where you have a screen where you can click and select different logical attributes that you consider relevant for determining whether a given user or employee or whoever shall have access. You click these together with the logical, with the logic that you require for this rule and or with brackets if the role of the employee is A, or if the role is B, or if the role is C, then you are authorized. So basically, it's allowing you to bring in the role-based authorizations based on more than one role, but you can also bring all different types of scenarios. I recently, or in testing, I put up a scenario where I said I want to hide the marital status of an employee based on the date when he left the enterprise. If the date is not yet reached, we will show the marital status because then in HR this can be relevant. However, if the employee has already left and he has resigned from the organization, then the marital status shall be hidden. Then of course you can hide all the other different fields with the same logic as well. And I'm not a coder, I've never done that, but it was very easy for me to achieve that. Now that said, how does the new masking look and feel? Basically, we are still capable of masking fields completely or partially. Here it's all the same patterns where we say we show the first character, but the other characters are not shown. We're capable of emptying the field. So the personal number here is the key field. Well, I can take this out. It's only in the UI. It's not affecting anything in the application layer or database layer, but just here in the UI, the data are not being shown. We can switch a field in an edit transaction. We can switch this to display only. And the reveal on demand feature, similar case, the amount is a number. We would by default mask it out over the complete length of the field. But if I'm authorized to see it, I get an additional option in the menu by which I can confirm that, yes, I want to see these data. In addition, I can be asked to put in a reason code or free text, which can be locked. And then I am, for a limited period of time, allowed to see all the data which I'm actually authorized to see in the screen. There could be more fields which are reveal on demand relevant. There could be additional fields I'm not authorized to see, and those will remain masked for me. Now that's for SAP GUI. It's quite similar with SAP Fury, so UI5-based features where we can achieve a masking. We can also mask links. So the link basically in this respect would still be active. You could click on it and be forwarded, but you can change the text, how it's being displayed. We are also capable of, however, deactivating link. So disabling a field so it can't be changed anymore, or the links as well. We can hide all the information, so empty the fields, and also the reveal on demand functionality is available in UI5 and Fury. It is similar in Web2 Pro ABAP and Web Client UI, so I spare you the display of these, how they look. Now, with this short functional overview of masking, a few words on GDPR, which has been driving quite some of the customer activities in the last 2 years. It was very interesting journey for customers as well as for us. In the end, my understanding of the whole thing, GDPR is first of all relevant for Europeans all over the world, but I think it's only the first step in a lot of different legal requirements coming up. So California has recently put into effect a law as well that is somehow modeled on GDPR, however, with a different idea of why it's brought. We see that in Turkey, they have a law right now also available, which is closely modeled to GDPR, hopefully without the flaws. And the China cybersecurity law is a different feature. In all these cases, a functionality like masking can be very relevant. Now, for GDPR specifically, we've been talking a lot. And of course, there's applicability of masking in GDPR relevant respects. However, I would not dare to point at any specific point or any specific article where I would say masking is required in order for you to be compliant. For GDPR compliance, it is more a matter of the legal department determining in your organization what is required in order to cover that. After these requirements are more clear, it's a matter of transporting or converting them into real technical requirements. And then it could very well be that your masking is a solution by which you can achieve compliance in specific areas. So this has been the learning from a lot of our customers. But of course, we decrease the risk and the accessibility of specific data. We are allowing you to depersonalize information if required. We had customers who utilized this in test scenarios or also in IT support scenarios. So the IT support sitting outside of Europe, but accessing data of European employees, which then, where the personal identity information then need to be protected. And this is done with masking, for instance. Some customers told us it could be a potential alternative to data blocking. That said, innovation lifecycle management is the solution that SAP positions in this field. And I would not suggest you to replace information lifecycle management with your masking. Potentially, however, what customers have looked at is whether they can achieve compliance in specific areas for a limited period as a part of their roadmap towards GDPR compliance. I'm asking is very quick to bring about. So they saw it as a chance to show that they are taking GDPR seriously, that they are taking first steps, and that they are trying to do what they can do in a short time already before they tackle the approach to get to the final solution. We also have a couple of success stories in North America. It's mainly CF Industries. You may have heard of them. They are a producer and distributor of nitrogen fertilizer. Their use case was quite straightforward and high level initially because they said we want to avoid the theft of mass data. So they really went into SE16, SE16N and related table displays and configured these for masking. Now, specific columns then fields in the table, a field basically then is repeated in each row. So the complete column is protected by masking. And that is something they brought about as a matter of a couple of days. We're still in contact with them sometimes, and we've just heard that they are now intending to take it a step further, 2 years running, and intend to also protect specific business transactions with your masking. We have more references coming up. Basically, we have utilities in Germany, big utilities in Germany. There's a couple of them though, and they had exactly the reason that they sold off their IT service department to the Far East, and then found, oh, GDPR is on us, and actually they could not allow employees in Far East to access the employee data anymore. So they brought in your masking in order to allow APJ employees to at least do the first level support. And 85% of problems appear to be possible to solve in this first level. For the second level support, however, the cases had to be shifted back into Europe, but then at least 85% of the business case basically was still possible to achieve. We also have another customer. It's quite interesting. It's a big enterprise that bought another very big enterprise, but then was forced by the authorities to sell parts of their products to a competitor. Now that's already a muddy setup, but more muddy is that these products which are now belong to the competitor cannot be moved technically out of their system and into the competitor system. This will take a couple of years to implement. Meanwhile, all the transactions are still running through the initial owner's system. And of course, employees of the initial owner may not access these data anymore at all. Now they have brought in UR masking. They are implementing the bodies. They're not running on S/4HANA, but they're basically building a list where they maintain all the product codes that are belonging to the competitor. And based on this, have bodies implemented that would then mask out the data. We are considering with them going for an additional project where basically based on the product that somebody wants to access, we determine in the process after input already whether this is restricted and then completely block access into the transaction. But that is another topic. Now, when talking about UI logging, the speed camera, there's not so much to see in UI logging screen-wise. Basically, it happens in the background in black. Somebody is accessing the data. So this is an example from HR information, and this data access is being protocoled in black. So the user would not notice it. There's no possibility for him to know from a performance round trip time perspective that he is being monitored. However, interesting is what is happening in the background. We are writing away a lot of data. We are triggering automatic alerts immediately after a specific data access that has been predefined has happened. Now, from our experience, customers use this, but very sparingly, because it should be a very specific definition. Otherwise, you would expect to get a lot of information or a lot of alerts, but a lot of false positives. So the more specific something is to define this in this area, the more likely is that you really get only those cases that are critical alerts. Now, if the alert is coming up, or just when you have a doubt about what's happening, you would dispatch somebody to do an in-depth analysis. And basically, I have just put a screenshot of the data which we are keeping or which we are capable of keeping, where we basically say in the header, we augment additional meta information pertaining to the round trip OT access, where we say the ID of the GUI, the timestamp, the name of the transaction, the name of the user who is accessing it, the IP from where he is accessing it, also the host name. So this is the name of my old laptop in SAP. We are also logging which system and client, SAP system and client were used, and also the technology. So it's interesting to know whether an access happens through SAP GUI or Fury, or you're just looking for a very specific access from a WebDoom Pro ABAP application. SAP technology comes in when one technology like RFC or Business Warehouse Access contains multiple sub-technologies, different interfaces, which we're covering in this one channel. And there's a couple of more things that we put here. But basically, the important thing is that we are logging the input. So in this case, there was a person number 1 and an info type number 8 triggered. Info type 8 in PA30 is for you who work in HR, you know it. For everybody else, it's salary information. So it's exactly the case of what we have just seen here, which was also the sample case in your masking. Now, the input is already quite good, and a lot of our customers, usually the very big ones who say otherwise we would be drowning in data, we actually limit our logging to the input, and we actually only maintain the input when the field is filled. So they would have like 3 lines in their logging in this case. However, many other customers, and it's almost all customers actually also log parts of the output. And basically they say, well, at least I need to know some of the key fields. The person number 1 would be relevant to know that we accessed this particular screen and the value shown is the employee number 1. Whether you want to keep the name of the employee is another question, but it's technically possible. And our configuration logic basically is supporting that, because we say, if anybody enters PA30 transactions, for instance, or SE16 transaction, or any other transaction, every move within this transaction, in all the subscreens, in all the tabs that may be existing all the actions which are in these transactions, we are logging this all. Now, this is very powerful, but of course also brings the risk of providing too much information, which is why after defining on transaction level what you want to mask, you can refine this and basically select off the different areas, sections. So all these sections here with the one pay XX are one section that would be one hook that you can take out, and all these information would not be taken anymore. Or you can take it down to field level and you can empty the field. You can also say, I want to encrypt the field. So in the database, it's stored in an encrypted fashion. So whoever steals the URL logging log file would not get a copy of all the relevant and really interesting data, but he would get encrypted information only. And also here we can replace the value completely by something that you can define. So you can write anything that you want here. And instead of the actual name, something else would be showing up. Now the alerting scenario is quite similar. There's not much to see, but a data access is resulting in a temporary log being written, which then, if the prerequisites are filled, is triggering the standard SAP alerting framework. And with the definitions and configurations in this framework, you can then trigger a message which is sent out via the supported channels. Now that can be an email, that can be a system message, SMS, anything you want to have here. Last but not least, concerning the integration with SAP Enterprise Threat Detection, we think this is a highly interesting area, because UI logging as a provider of information for functionality like ETD is strong. All the things you can do in UI logging and analyze manually and set up with your alerts maybe is something that enterprise threat detection would help you automatize. Now, what we are already having is a technical integration with SAP Enterprise Threat Detection. However, in the next support packages, we also intend to start bringing specific patterns in enterprise threat detection pertaining to information from UI logging. Patterns being just a definition in enterprise threat detection, what, if it happens, constitutes a threat. And that can well be coming from different logs, and UI logging being one of those log files. Now, one of the last slides for UI logging, its benefits for GDPR. When for masking, I said I would not dare point at specific regulations where it would be very helpful. For UI logging, I think the case is slightly different. There's one specific requirement pertaining of the mandate to inform authorities in case of a data breach within 72 hours after you get aware of it. Now, this is quite tricky. In the best case, you have a hunch yourself that something is wrong and can do an analysis. In the worst case, you hear that you have a breach through the press, and then your 72 hours start ticking. It's not quite clear how much information is actually going to be required and what the authorities are going to want and are going to sanction. However, it's quite obvious that the better information you can provide in this time, the more likely it is that authorities will not find you the worst case scenario, but will see that you have done your best to, comply to this rule, and that you are actually taking GDPR serious and are providing the features to cover for it. Now, that said, within 72 hours, we have heard from one customer, we can do this all by ourselves. There is this and that log, the change log and all the other logs. And we just sat there and then thought like, okay, there's like one or two persons who suddenly are asked to look into it and define what actually, or find out whether anything has happened, whether anybody accessed any specific data, whether these data accesses or contain personal information. Only then do you need to report. So that was the first decision point by which you can, or to which you have to come within a very short time. And if you come to that point and say, yes, we need to issue a report, you also have to find out exactly, or in the best case, as much as you can, exactly what has happened. So what natural persons are involved, which of the information has been leaked. And maybe last but not least, in any case, you want to know who done it. And these are all things, if you consider putting together different logs with completely different structures, you would need something like enterprise threat detection. In the best case, it's capable of doing that. However, UI logging is just one log, unified, so no need to integrate different types of formats, and one person going through it has a much higher chance of finding out a lot more of what's actually going on. And it is also providing all the information you may want to hand on to the authorities in order to show them what has happened. So we think that the best chance of complying with this 72-hour regulation is a feature like UI logging that is allowing you to have a coherent data set on exactly what has happened, to analyze on demand and also prove in hindsight what has happened and what may not have happened. Now, we also have references in the logging sector. One of the main reference, actually it's quite old already, is a medical high school with highly relevant or highly private information, where they simply said we want to have this in order to know who is accessing data. They set up a panel of 4 members or 4 employees who, on demand, when there was a doubt whether some data had been abused, sat together, got their user activated to analyze the log. We're sitting together, we're looking at the actual data entries, what had happened, and we're then capable of deciding whether a certain employee had infringed on the data access rights. Now they did this just 3, 4, 5 times and issued warnings to these and published that they had used UI logging to issue warnings to not named anonymous employees. And they said afterwards, roughly 95% or so of all the strange data accesses have completely vanished. They just don't happen anymore. And that is, from my perspective, a soft factor, but maybe not the most irrelevant factor for a solution like UI logging. Now, we have another anonymous reference. It is a use case from the Greater China area of a power company who basically say they want to monitor the data which go into other systems of partners, for instance. Partners and sub enterprises belong to themselves, where before that they had no visibility at all who was accessing which type of data, and they implemented UI logging mainly for the RFC flavor, but also for the sub GUI flavor, to see who is accessing which types of data. And said this is great because finally they see where data are flowing, and by that they intend to also refine their access setup. So RFCs, who can access or get data from which system, who can trigger RFC connections, which transactions are used for that. And they think they will considerably enhance their stability towards accidental loss of data. Now, this is very fresh. I'm very curious to see how this is going to look. Now, as my last slide on the product roadmap, these products are having a roadmap. So recently, we brought in the initial releases for the S/4HANA world in masking and in logging. And also in logging the extended passport, so grouping of related logs, round trips in one area. So you look for one specific incident, one data value being accessed, and you would immediately see all the other round trips of this user in the session around it to determine what, or to understand better what he has done. Now, what we plan to bring also in the masking realm is the framework for configuring the attribute rule-based authorization, the dynamic scenarios, which we then provide the functionality that a business user is configuring and we put into ABAP coding. We are also integrating UI mask with SAP Enterprise Threat Detection. The reveal on demand trace is highly relevant. It is very strong information that somebody has willingly or voluntarily accessed specific information, and that's very strong also for ETD to look into. And for UI logging, we are bringing a new feature package quite soon. It's basically a continuation of the initial things, a stronger analysis cockpit, but especially in Q4, we are bringing a new completely revamped log analyzer where we put basically one user into the steering or at the steering wheel, the data protection officer or employees of the data protection office. We are currently collecting the ideas what these type of roles want to see, what they can do and can get out of your logging data, and will build user interfaces to cover their very specific requirements. Just because in case of any data infringement and any leak that you are suspecting, you want to be able to run this analysis quite fast and quite efficiently, hopefully within 72 hours, by people who are not necessarily the technical cracks, but who are more legal professionals or maybe business professionals. From a product direction, we intend to bring together masking logging. Those products grew separately in different areas. Now they are both with me, and I have the intention of bringing also a technically integrated release of both, because there are benefits that we can leverage. UI logging has a very wide reach of information it can easily collect. That is what masking would need to bring about dynamic authorizations more easily. So that's one area, but also masking having a dynamic authorization regime or policy engine can help UI logging to determine especially or exactly in which incidents or situations it shall write the log, or a more a wider log, and if then that happens again, or in not critical circumstances, it can just write a very shallow log just with some of the header information. Now, altogether, in the end, the product vision is, of course, that this should be as a bundle on the SAP S/4HANA Cloud, the public cloud. I put it into product vision for 2021. Don't crucify me if we don't bring it by 2021, but maybe by 2020, or maybe also 2022. This is a work in progress and is not very clear. All this information is available also publicly in SAP roadmaps. Just look for masking, logging, or enterprise threat detection. And if you have any other questions, please let me know. If you want to look into a more detailed presentation or want to share it with other people inside your organization, there's a share available, which is open until the 4th of June. So you can access this via scanning this barcode. With that, I am done with my sermon. I'm 2 minutes over time, but I would still be, of course, available for your questions.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Tobias. I think there are two very interesting questions. One is whether UI logging or masking also supports Employee Central in SuccessFactors.
Okay. Now, this is a topic. SuccessFactors has been bought by SAP recently, like other solutions, Ariba, Concur. Most of these solutions, and SuccessFactors as well, is based on a different technical idea. Basically, you have Java-based clients. This means data is usually pumped or sometimes pumped in raw into databases in the front end and is then being processed in the front end. Now, this is unfortunately a scenario where our server-based architecture does not fit. So currently, we do not offer coverage for this very relevant scenario of SuccessFactors. We are thinking about ways how to cover it, but it would mean a complete re-architecturing of our current solution. We would not be able to do it centrally from the backend anymore, from the server, but we would have to move into the UIs. So we are currently discussing with several applications in SAP whether and how we could integrate, or whether they could bring some functionality, potentially drawing on our policy server thing. But as of now, this is all music for the future. And as of now, we do not cover that, unfortunately.
Okay, perfect. And I would say we do one last question. As I personally think that's very interesting. What's the difference between the read access logging and UI logging? Can you explain it in one short sentence?
I can explain in short sentence. Basically, we offer a wider range of objects that we cover with UI logging. As I mentioned earlier, read access logging has its benefits. Mainly, it's free of charge. It is also easy to configure for limited scenarios. You have a recording functionality for specific fields that you want to have logged when they are being accessed. You can add them to the scope of what RAL logs. However, as soon as you have more scenarios and or bigger scenarios and want to have more fields, or you want to have a bigger idea of the context in which data were accessed, UI logging is more beneficial. For RAL, you need to still build it from the bottom upwards, and all the fields that could be relevant, you need to specifically put them into the configuration. For UI logging, you have a top-down approach. You say, based on the transaction level, what you want to have. So that's something where the customer who went live with UI logging within 1 day after getting the add-on installed, because they said basically all the transactions where they wanted to have data logged. So it can be very fast. Of course, they drowned in data, but they had a burning leak apparently. They refined their configurations later. It was also not a huge deal of work. But then they said, we have now a really nice setup. We have a lot of data that we are logging, but these are the relevant information. And when they looked at RAL before, they said we could not possibly achieve what we wanted. It's all over the system what we want to achieve. It would take years to bring about with RAL. Now that's one benefit, the fast implementation and a bigger scope. The second benefit of UI logging mainly is that we are supporting a lot wider range of SAP NetViewer releases, plus also more technical channels. For instance, the business warehouse access channel is something read access logging does simply not offer. So that's the only, or that's the channel that only UI logging is covering. Plus, in the channels where we cover, we have found that UI logging in most cases has a much wider scope of objects which we can log and which RAL is not capable of logging. Last status I heard or I knew was that F4 helps were just being covered years after RAL was released, but that's already years back. But other things, ALV trees, for instance, and other table display structures are not possible to cover with read access logging at all. So when you use this functionality, you have to be sure or have to make sure that you're not involuntarily having a blind spot by which data can be channeled out, and you would never have the chance to notice. I hope this is short enough an answer for now.
Perfect. I think it's perfect. With that being said, thank you very much, Tobias. I really appreciate your time presenting the UI logging, UI masking functionality here. For everyone else, thank you very much for joining the webinar. We will end it here. All the other questions that are unanswered, please feel free to reach out to us or to Tobias directly. And again, we will send out an email tomorrow with the recording and also with the questions, that in a written form, the answers to the questions. That being said, thank you very much for your time. Thank you again very much, Tobias, and I wish you a good rest of your day. Thank you very much.